Over to Vicky Young in Central Lobby. Vicky, can you explain to us how this result will be interpreted?
Yeah, I'm just watching the screen here because MPs have filed back in, so it could be pretty close. Remember, this is MPs voting on whether they have no confidence in the government, tabled, of course, by the opposition, which means that those who've gone through the I lobby are the opposition, that's Labour, saying that they don't have confidence in the government. Those going through the no lobby will be the government. And now, as we said earlier, we do expect the government to win this. I mean, politics is in a strange place, but we have heard from the Democratic Unionist Party and from many Brexiteer Conservatives who have said they will back the government tonight, despite their massive reservations about Brexit. So we don't expect a surprise there, but that's how we need to interpret it. The ayes will be the opposition. We expect them to lose. Now, while we wait for that, I'm just going to speak quickly to Chuka Umunna, Labour backbencher, of course. Now, your policy in the Labour Party is if you don't get your general election, i.e. if you fail here, you have to look at other steps. You want another referendum. Is it likely to happen? Your leader is very, very reluctant.
Well, it's quite clear there are a number of Conservative MPs who are prepared to defy the government and give this decision back to the people. Joe Johnson, Sam Gyimah have resigned over this, Gitto Bubb, Philip Lee, I mean there's a whole raft of them, and there are, I think, sufficient numbers that if Labour MPs were whipped to support this going back to the people, we'd be within a shout of getting it through.
That means Jeremy Corbyn has to go for it, because at the moment you've got, what, 71 Labour MPs? That's not enough, is it?
Well, and that's just those who have signed a statement. It's actually more than that. It's somewhat more than that, because not all of those who are on the record as supporting a people's vote, as it were, actually signed a statement.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
Look, there's no doubt about this, that in a way this is in the hands of as much the leadership of the Conservative Party as the Labour Party, whether we actually send this back to the people. But that is clearly, if there's impasse here in gridlock in Westminster, how else do you resolve this if not by referring them back to the people? Another very important thing is that one thing you can say, in spite of all the chaos that you've been reporting over the days, is that the consensus view is that we shouldn't be leaving without a deal. That would be absolutely disastrous for our economy. The European Union would need to grant us an extension to the Article 50 process so that we don't fall off a cliff. And they have said they won't give us more time simply for more renegotiation, but they would give it for the purposes of a democratic vote.
And find a deal. Shouldn't you be working to try and find that deal? If Theresa May's going to reach out to senior parliamentarians, and some in your party, could be you, shouldn't you not be working with her to do that?
Well, for the greatest respect, through the course of these negotiations, people like me, I previously argued as a way of reaching a compromise for us to stay in the customs union and the single market. But I think that ship has sailed now. And the question is, how do you solve the gridlock? How do you stop no deal from happening? And Labour's conference resolution is clear on this. If we can't get a general election and not successful in this vote just now, the spirit of that conference motion is for us to move towards a people's vote. And I hope that we would do that by the end of this week, because we haven't got time to delay. Just 37 sitting days until exit day.
Okay, Chuka Umunna, thank you very much. That's the view of some Labour MPs. Let's see what happens in this vote.
Vicky, thank you. We'll be going into the chamber very shortly because MPs have filed back in, and we'll just be waiting for the result in the next few moments. Pfizer, just listening to Chuka Umunna, if you lose this vote of no confidence in the government, which you say you expect to, is it a people's vote? We're going straight into the Commons.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock!
That's the result from the Speaker, John Bercow. We heard there that the government has, in fact, won that vote, and the motion of no confidence has been lost by Labour. Let's listen to the Prime Minister.
This House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, guarantee our security, and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. I believe this duty is shared by every member of this House, and we have a responsibility to identify a way forward that can secure the backing of the House. To that end, I've proposed a series of meetings between senior parliamentarians and representatives of the government over the coming days, and I would like to invite the leaders of parliamentary parties to meet with me individually, and I would like to start these meetings tonight. Mr. Speaker, the government approaches these meetings in a constructive spirit, and I urge others to do the same. But we must find solutions that are negotiable and command sufficient support in this House. And as I've said, we will return to the House on Monday to table an amendable motion and to make a statement about the way forward. The House has put its confidence in this government. I stand ready to work with any member of this House to deliver on Brexit and ensure that this House retains the confidence of the British people.
Point of order, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night the House rejected the government's conclusion of its negotiations with the European...
Order. I called the Prime Minister on a point of order, and the Prime Minister was heard. And she was heard in relative tranquility and certainly with courtesy. And the same courtesy will be extended to the Leader of the Opposition and to others who seek to raise points of order. That's the way it is. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night the House rejected the government's deal, emphatically. A week ago, the House voted to condemn the idea of a no-deal Brexit. Before there can be any positive discussions about the way forward, the government must remove clearly, once and for all, the prospect of the catastrophe of a no-deal Brexit in the EU and all the chaos that would come as a result of that. And I invite the Prime Minister to confirm now that the government will not countenance a no-deal Brexit from the European Union.
Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I must say that I welcome the offer of talks from the Prime Minister. I think it's important, Mr. Speaker, that all of us recognise the responsibility that we have, and on the back of the defeat of the government's motion last night, that we have to work together where we can to find a way forward. I commit the Scottish National Party to working constructively with the government. However, I do think it's important, in that regard, that we make it clear to the Prime Minister, in the spirit of openness in these talks, that the issue of extending Article 50 of a people's vote and avoiding a no deal have to be on the table. We have to agree to enter these talks on the basis that we can move forward and achieve a result which will unify all the nations of the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Well, we heard a statement there immediately after winning that vote of no confidence from the Prime Minister Theresa May. That was followed by the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and also by the leader of the SNP in Westminster, Ian Blackford. First of all, your response to the interesting offer from Theresa May, which she didn't make last night. Yes. She said she was reaching out, but this was a specific invitation to the leaders of those opposition parties. What's changed?
I'm very glad that she's made it. Well, she's obviously got to. This is done from a position of weakness. You made a very good point earlier when you spoke about the fact that the government would want a conference vote, but you can't just ignore what happened yesterday. There was massive political defeat, so obviously the government's got to do this in order to find a solution. But Jeremy Corbyn's answer was very significant. I've always felt that the problem with reaching out is that, and one of the reasons we're all trying to guess what will happen in Brexit, and I've realised why we don't know. It's because it depends on what the Labour Party front bench decide, and they haven't made up their mind yet. So we can't guess because they don't know. And that's why I genuinely think he's now dodged dodging having the talks because he wouldn't know what to say when he was in them.
Was it wise to make that a red line in terms of ruling out no deal?
No, I mean, I think that's a very important point for a lot of MPs. Like, they don't just want to take no deal off the table. They feel like their clock has been run down. I actually think it's very wrong to say that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't been wanting to have discussions. In fact, you know, on the one hand, people complain that he doesn't want another public vote. On the other hand, they say that he doesn't want to push through Brexit. But at the same time, you know, they've said time and time again, this point around the customs union and the strong relationship with the single market. And this is where, you know, Theresa May will come in trouble, because all of the other opposition leaders will say that.
He was just offered, I don't want to be unfair, but he was just offered that, and we just saw it, didn't we? And I thought that he turned down the offer. Right?
No,
I mean, you can't say that.
Well, hang on, he's made it a precondition.
He's made a precondition. Setting out conditions. He's starting the negotiation, you know, from minute one. I think what we've heard just then means that actually an extension to Article 50 is very much more likely, with all the consequences that that involves. And, you know, I think everybody has to understand, you know, where that is going. That actually means, for example, we face the very serious and important point that we're going to have to fight the European elections in May. For example, you know, we can't extend Article 50 and not fight those elections. That hasn't been properly thought through. But, you know, we on the Leave side, we will start gearing up for that, and we will ensure that, you know, those elections are fought. You can't just extend and not have those elections, for example.
And was it wise to make a precondition before the talks have started, Pfizer? Is that what you would have advised Jeremy Corbyn to do?
Look, I think it's very important to have some sense of security at this point. We've had 2.5 years of going around in circles. It's such a mess. And the only reason why we're going to have to extend this now is because Theresa May has handled this so badly.
We can't have no deal unless we have a deal or some sort of arrangement. So there's no point. Parliament can declare it. Theresa May can't even declare there's not going to be a deal. She doesn't want no deal because she's advanced the deal. She wants a deal, but she can't announce there's going to be no deal.
But there are members of her cabinet who want no deal to be taken off the table.
I want no deal not to happen, but she can't take it off the table.
But she's been using it.
Because you can't take it off the table, because if we don't have a deal, there will be no deal.
The truth is, the reason we had such a bad deal was because the European Union...
It was a bad deal, by the way.
Well, they never believed that we were prepared to walk away. And that's why it was such a weak, feeble negotiation.
On that, let's go back into the Houses of Parliament, where Vicky Young is no doubt meeting MPs as they come out of the chamber.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty intriguing there, isn't it? Jeremy Corbyn getting up and saying she has to take no deal off the table. So really putting conditions on those talks before they even start. Theresa May clearly wanting to get going as quickly as possible, saying the Westminster Party leaders could meet her as soon as tonight. Let's find out what the SNP's view is on all of this. I'm joined by Stephen Geffins. Is your party also putting preconditions on these talks?
Well, we're nearly 3 years on from the referendum, 2.5 years on. What we've said is that, first of all, we need an extension of Article 50. You can't do this by 29th of March, given the complexity and given the time that's been wasted by the Prime Minister already. Also, she needs to consider a people's vote. She can't disregard something that's been talked about by a significant part of the population and a significant number of MPs. And finally, no deal has to be off the table as well. That's something I think we can all agree on. But extension of Article 50, give us the time to have proper talks, is something that's really important now.
Just to really clarify here, are you setting that out as a precondition? You won't even step in the room unless she says it, or are you willing to meet her to discuss that?
Well, as Ian Blackford made clear just a few minutes ago in the chamber, he said the Prime Minister must consider these. So let's give the Prime Minister the opportunity to respond to that. She's not had the opportunity to respond. But in the same way we've had a very clear position on where we'd like to end up, we've also got a very clear position that we've put to the Prime Minister, and she needs to start engaging with that.
Is there any negotiated deal that you would support? Aren't you being disingenuous here? You want a second referendum, you want to stay in the EU. You've been very open about that. You're not really looking for negotiating a deal here, are you?
Do you know something? There is no party in the House of Commons that's got as much experience of successful minority government as the SNP has. We're in our second stint of minority government. We've passed meaningful legislation. But that means talking to colleagues in other political parties, and it means a responsible opposition. It's happened in the Scottish Parliament, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be happening down here as well. No other party has the level of experience the SNP has on this, but the Prime Minister must meaningfully engage. The first party to come out with any compromise was the Scottish National Party 2.5 years ago.
Great, Stephen Geffens, thank you very much indeed. So that's the view from the SNP. We'll see how soon the other leaders take up this invitation from the Prime Minister and really whether they can make much headway before, of course, that deadline of next week on Monday when the Prime Minister has to come and lay a motion here in the House of Commons.
Pfizer, it may be that Theresa May is lonely this evening if neither Jeremy Corbyn nor Ian Blackford actually turn up to those talks this evening. Is it now your position, because Labour had a policy that they would call a vote of no confidence, if they lost it, it's a people's vote?
Well, that was written as everything's on the table. I think what they will do now is again try and have those conversations with the Conservatives around a customs union. The truth is that this isn't the end, right? The incompetency will continue. There'll be a lot of problems
He's not in favour of a customs union, by the way. He's actually in favour of an unnegotiable customs union. So this will become a problem. He's in favour of a customs union in which we retain our ability to set trade deals, which is not available, obviously.
Can I just say, just because obviously I have these conversations with people in the leadership, that there is a bit of wriggle room there in terms of talking about staying close in terms of the economy. Now, the truth is about Brexit, and you'll maybe agree with me on this, is that there's always this problem with staying close to the economy and democracy and sovereignty and how that weighs up. And ultimately, for the Conservatives, and this is why this problem is going to continue, to say, Theresa May is not going to come out and say single market customs union and some things that Labour won, because that will divide the Conservatives again.
All right. A single market.
Let's move on, because earlier Andrew Neil sat down with the senior Tory Brexiteer, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Mogg, it's been reported that Brexiteers celebrated the defeat of Theresa May's deal last night with glasses of champagne at your London townhouse. Is that true?
I look at it more as a meeting with a drink rather than a grand celebration. It was just people coming around after the vote to have a drink and discuss what the next steps are, which is, I think, the most interesting part of it. A celebration would imply we're at an end point, and I don't think even the most optimistic commentator would say that we're at an end point.
No, indeed, we could be in for lots more uncertainty, even turmoil. Did it never cross your mind that you might be toasting the demise of the best Brexit you could get, and that you might end up with a softer Brexit, or no Brexit at all?
I think to get to no Brexit would be extraordinarily difficult. The law has been passed to deliver Brexit. That kicks in on the 29th of March, other things being equal. And the Labour Party is still saying, Jeremy Corbyn said today, still saying that it believes on delivering on the vote of June 2016. So I think no Brexit is very hard to achieve. So that leaves the issue of a softer Brexit. Well, it couldn't be much softer than was in with the withdrawal agreement. So the risk on that is, of course, there could be even softer. But as that isn't really Brexit anyway, that is a relatively modest risk to be taking.
You told ITV that, and I quote, people did not vote for a deal, they voted to leave. But that's not true, is it? The Vote Leave campaign consistently told us we'd leave on a deal. Indeed, it would be the biggest, the best, the easiest deal in history. They didn't say no deal.
Various individuals said various things throughout the campaign on both sides about what would happen in the event of a vote to leave or a vote not to leave. The government has a responsibility of implementing policy, which I think people...
But who in the Vote Leave campaign during the referendum said we could leave on no deal?
Well, I think people constantly referred to what Article 50 said. That was a mainstay of discussions that people were having.
I mean, I've got the Vote Leave prospectus here for June 2016 in the run-up to the referendum. It would be possible to negotiate a new settlement with the UK, with the EU, a UK-EU free trade deal before the next general election. No mention of leaving on no deal. People did not vote leave to leave on no deal.
No, I don't think that's right. I think you're taking a short excerpt from one pamphlet. There was a great deal more over the campaign than that. A great deal of discussion about what would happen.
But this is the Vote Leave Fund. I cannot find any Vote Leave reference to the prospect of no deal.
I think you've set a very small net to catch your fish in today.
I mean, you said on no deal, the world will not end.
Well,
I mean, is that your idea of reassurance? that the world will not end.
Well, if you listen to some of the people on the other side of the argument, you'd think that the world was going to end.
Yeah, but there's a lot between their situation now and the world ending. There's a lot, within that continuum, there's a lot that could go wrong.
That's right.
What is the biggest danger if we go down this route?
I think the biggest risk is going to be something that hasn't been identified, because if it had been identified, it would have been dealt with. So that's the bit of your question I can't answer.
So it's an unknown.
It's an unknown, actually. I think if it were known, it could be dealt with. That I accept that there are risks of leaving without a deal, but there are also very considerable opportunities that we can get away from the very high tariffs and non-tariff barriers of the EU.
Well, let's come on to the because you have claimed that in no-deal Brexit, with that we could cut tariffs on food, clothes, footwear, and that would lead to cuts in prices. By how much would prices fall on this scenario?
Well, it depends on the individual goods. That if you take, for example, trainers, which you may be more likely to wear than I am, but nonetheless, if a pair of trainers cost of production is £10, £12 for with the tariff, that then feeds up with the margin to £36 rather than £30. So that's the type.
But overall, how much would prices fall?
It would depend on the individual goods. It would depend on the ability of importers to resource goods from cheaper countries. It would depend on the regulatory environment.
Because the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, it crunched the numbers on quite optimistic assumptions, to your way of thinking. It finds that overall prices would fall by only about 1%. And that's hardly transformative, given that it doesn't even reverse the 2% rise in prices since the fall in sterling after the referendum. So it's no big deal, is it?
Well, we have to see what happened to sterling at the point at which we leave and things are settled. The uncertainty around the UK economy.
But it's already fallen, and that's adding to prices, and a cut in tariffs wouldn't compensate.
It's been a boost to
that.
Our exports. In some areas, the tariff declines are very significant, and the IFS is making, I think, limited assumptions on the changes of behaviour that you would have with the lower prices.
It's assuming that all tariffs would be abolished.
But you've also got to deal with non-tariff barriers as well. And those feed in together, because if you don't change the non-tariff barriers, you don't necessarily give the access.
But the tariffs are the ones that you can calculate. Non-tariffs, as you know, can be more difficult to deal with. The IFS have assumed that all tariffs would be abolished. Would that be your intention under a no-deal Brexit?
If it were up to me, my policy would be on the very first day after we'd left, remove all tariffs on all goods not produced in any quantity in the United Kingdom.
If we were to cut all or most tariffs unilaterally, why would other countries want to do a free trade deal with us? They would have get their free entry to Britain. Why would they bother?
Why would they bother? Because all the economic evidence is that cutting tariffs unilaterally and non-tariff barriers benefits your economy regardless of reciprocity.
So why bother with a trade deal?
Trade deals may open up other people's markets, but one of the best ways of opening up other people's markets is saying, we're going to open our market to you.
But our market would be opened up.
That's right.
Give me an example of which a free trade's been done in which one side already had its borders entirely open and the other didn't.
Well, that's not where the world's been starting from, because the post-war experience has been of very high tariffs.
So there is not an example.
Well, Singapore has done free trade deals, and but Singapore doesn't have, or has minimal tariffs on goods going into it. So you could
Singapore is a service economy.
Absolutely, but you could say Singapore as an example.
But there's no example of an open economy that had no tariffs, doing a free trade deal with another country that had high tariffs. You take away the incentive.
No, you don't. There's a very mercantilist view of trade that has historically proved to be incorrect.
If you stop government holding it, Mr. Trump has that view.
I think
the French have often had that view. The emerging markets have had that view. They may be wrong or right, but if you cut our tariffs to zero, you take away any incentive for someone to do a free trade deal.
But every country that has cut its tariffs has benefited economically, regardless of whether it's done it both ways round, because you reduce the cost for consumers, you reduce the input costs for producers, and you concentrate on doing things that you're good at, your comparative advantage. And this is one of the real advantages of Brexit. Trade deals are a bonus if you can get there, but actually the ability to cut your tariffs and open up your economy is extremely beneficial.
You think we should be doing a Canada-style free trade deal with the EU? You say that the EU has always offered such a Canada-style.
It has, yes, it did.
Said that
it's been offered by...
But only for Great Britain, not for Northern Ireland. A canister-style deal would not of its own deal with the Irish border.
I think if you check with Peter Lilly, who is the expert on this, it's been offered to the whole of the United Kingdom.
Oh, Theresa May was there and she said what we've seen from the European Union isn't available or on offer for the whole of the UK. It's only on offer for the Great Britain. Northern Ireland would be carved out. Prime Minister was in the room when that was offered.
No, it was offered publicly. It wasn't just offered privately. Right. And the public statements seem to indicate it's offered for the whole of the United Kingdom.
The EU's free trade agreement with Canada, which it has, which you've often cited, it still involves physical checks at the border. You've only been to the Northern Irish border once, I understand. You suggested people could be, quote, inspected at the border as they were during the Troubles.
That was to do with the security question.
You don't really understand much about this border, do you?
No.
You're cavalier with it.
No, not at all. You're quoting from something that was clipped from an answer to a much longer, more detailed question. The issue with inspection at the border is that in the deals that we do with other countries, or even with countries where we don't have deals, there are minimal inspections nowadays. Ireland, for example, inspects 1% of non-EU goods going into it. It's not as it was in the old days when every single lorry load of goods was inspected.
But you said we would have the ability, as we had during the Troubles, for people to be inspected. These are your words.
No, what you need to look at is the full protection. What I was being asked about was if we had disorder, what would you be able to do at the border? And it's simply being clipped to make it look as if I'm talking about something else.
You and your allies, I would suggest, you shot your boat by trying to topple the Prime Minister prematurely in December, didn't you? Now her deal has gone down to catastrophic defeat. She's much weaker. You should have waited.
Well, actually, if you look at the numbers who voted against the deal yesterday and the numbers who voted against the Prime Minister and the vote of confidence from the Conservative benches, they're almost identical, so I don't think anything has changed in that sense.
You don't think that a challenge now, you're not allowed to do it, but a challenge now would have a better chance of success than you had in December?
I think it would have been too late.
Too late?
There simply isn't the time now. So the timing of the challenge we brought last year was determined essentially by working backwards from the 29th of March.
Well, there can't be another Tory challenge of confidence until December of next year. Mrs May is still leader. But there could be another vote of no confidence in the Commons as a whole. We've had one, there could be another one. If in the consultations Mrs May has said she's now going to make to try and get her deal back on the road again, if she leaned towards some kind of customs union or explicitly ruled out no deal, would you contemplate supporting a no confidence motion in the Commons?
No. Do I want, if Theresa May went down this route, a very bad deal delivered by her, or an even worse deal delivered by Jeremy Corbyn? So of course I would rather have a Conservative government doing it, and therefore I will back the government in a no-confidence vote.
So the message to Theresa May tonight is that even if she tilts towards an even softer Brexit, as it would be in your mind, towards a customs union, more realignment, you may not like it, but she need not fear that Jacob Rees-Mogg would side with a no-confidence motion.
I'll be completely clear. I will not vote against the government in a no-confidence
Even if
vote.
she moves in the direction of a customs union?
Even if she stands on her head on the dispatch box and says that she thinks we should have regulatory alignment, I will not vote in no confidence against her to put a Marxist into 10 Downing Street. I'm a Conservative.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew talking to Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier. We're joined here in the studio by the Work and Pension Secretary, Amber Rudd, and shortly we'll be joined by the Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner. First of all, a sense of relief?
Yes, a certain amount of relief. I was confident the Prime Minister would win it today. The Conservatives were always going to vote for her, and the DUP did as well. So, yes, I'm glad we got through that today, and I was pleased by her statement that followed.
Right, and in that statement, is it the fact that she is now, Theresa May, finally reaching out to the leaders, not just MPs, but to the leaders of the opposition parties?
Yes, that's right. I mean, yesterday she said in her statement, after the vote that she would be reaching out to parliamentarians, but today she was explicit that she was going to reach out to the leaders of all opposition parties. And actually, she's approached that with pace and urgency, saying, tonight, we start tonight.
But from a position of weakness. I mean, is it that she went that bit further? Because, Amber Rudd, the scale of the defeat yesterday, 230, is unprecedented. It was a massive blow.
It was a huge defeat, you know, we can't sort of sugar this one, it really was. But the fact is, it is a very contentious issue. It is a complicated withdrawal agreement. But the Prime Minister's done the right thing now. She said, right, it's time for a reset. We've got to find where the majority is in the House, and nothing is off the table.
Right, and in the spirit of that, and taking her at her word, how big an offer does she have to make?
Well, I think it's about finding out what the other parties want. It's not just about the Prime Minister saying, I mean, she's done that. She set out her deal. She said why it works, and that has been, as you said, rejected. And now what we need to find out is where the majority of the House is. So that's why there have to be lots of conversations, because it's not just about talking to one leader of one party. You know, the other parties are divided as well. We need to find out what the various groups and the different parties, what they want, so we can find where the majority is.
But she has restated her red lines in terms of leaving the single market and leaving the customs union. That doesn't sound like a big, bold offer of negotiation to the other side.
Well, I think you have to listen to that alongside what she said last night, when she said that she was going to try and find where the majority of the House is. This is what we would like to do. You saw yesterday the deal that we would like to do, but she's got to find...
But that was rejected.
That was rejected, exactly. Well, that's why, you know, today she made this sort of very big presentation after the vote of no confidence was rejected, and said, I'm going to be approaching all party leaders and senior parliamentarians.
All right, what would it look like? I mean, could it be that a customs union, a permanent customs union with the European Union is on the table?
Well, I don't know the answer to that.
But what do you think it should be?
Well, I have to say, it's really difficult to find out where the centre of the House is, where the majority is, partly because it's very difficult to know what the Labour Party thinks and what the different factions within that.
Well, we know what the Labour Party think. They want a permanent customs union.
But they don't all want that, and they want different things.
But that's the Labour leadership's policy, so should it be on the table?
Well, hang on a second. The Labour leadership policy is also for a people's vote once a general election is off the table, which actually Alistair Carmichael drew attention to today. So I'm looking forward to some clarity from Labour as to what they want. There's no point the Prime Minister going back and saying, would you like this? Would you like this? She has to find what their priorities are.
Right, but should it be on the table? I mean, if this is going to be a big offer to get that consensus, to get that majority of MPs to agree to a deal, they've rejected the deal that she put to them yesterday, should everything be on the table, including a customs union?
It seems to me that everything has to be on the table, because the priority is to find a negotiated settlement so that we can leave the European Union.
And if everything is on the table, does the Prime Minister need to be open to that?
I think she has said she will be open to that. What I was disappointed in tonight, if I may say, is that Jeremy Corbyn appeared to imply that he wouldn't have those discussions until she took no deal off the table. Now, that's rather difficult.
Is it difficult? That's
Yes.
actually a position you agree with. You want no deal taken off the table.
I think that no deal would be very bad news indeed for the country. And so what I have said is I support preparing for no deal in the same way that I support wearing a seatbelt when you get in a car if you're driving fast. You want to have it there just in case. But we need to find alternatives to it because it's so unattractive.
Right, but if that becomes the stated policy of the government, no deal, because we're still in this sort of deadlock, this gridlock in Parliament, and she cannot find a way through, then should it be no deal becomes policy? Could you stay in the government?
No deal will never be the policy of the government. No deal is only ever a contingency because we have triggered Article 50. It's only just in case. That's why it's in place. The government's determined to try and find a negotiated settlement. What worries me much more is that Jeremy Corbyn is already finding a way of trying to not have talks with the Prime Minister. It seems to me that what is worrying is the Labour leadership are trying to time this out to allow more disruption, when actually now we're really seeking to find a negotiated settlement.
What about your party? Because it's also got to get support from your colleagues.
Yes.
You know, scores of your colleagues who voted against the deal yesterday. If a customs union, you said everything has got to be on the table. If a customs union is on the table, what will that do to the Brexit Eurosceptic wing of your party?
Well, you're absolutely right. They don't want that. But in my view, what they proved today is that they are above all Conservatives, because every one of them, of course, supported the Prime Minister. They are Conservatives, as Jacob Rees-Mogg has said. So I think we can rely on them for support, but I think it's important to show that if they want want a majority in the House, as we do for an exit from the EU, they have to help us find it.
Right, and you just quoted Jacob Rees-Mogg there. He says his support for the government is unconditional. You can ignore that wing of the party and you can pivot to a much softer Brexit, which is what you would like to see.
We will never ignore that wing of the party. As Conservatives, we have to make sure that we find a deal that embraces the whole party. There's no point in just pivoting for the sake of it. But what they have to do, what I have to do, what everybody who has a different view about how we leave the EU, is be practical. We have to be practical. We have to find where the majority of MPs will vote through a deal where we can deliver on that outcome.
And if that majority coalesces round a customs union, would that split your party?
I certainly hope not. I don't think it would, because ultimately...
But it wouldn't be Brexit for many of the people that we have spoken to over the months in your party.
Well, they would have to take a careful look. They would have to take a careful look at where the will of the majority of MPs are. They want to leave the European Union. The terms on which we do it are important, but above all, if we deliver on leaving it, I think that should be the priority.
I'd just like to invite Angela Rayner, the Shadow Education Secretary, into the studio to sit with Amber Rudd. Just before I come to you, Angela, there were quotes, Amber Rudd, from Tom Watson, who is the deputy leader of the Labour Party, who said that Theresa May is too set in her ways, too aloof to lead. What do you say?
I think that's a bit personal, really, coming from Tom.
Is it true?
No, certainly not, no. You know, she's opened up today, she's made the offer.
But how late, Amber? This is 2.5 years in.
She's had 2.5 years to pull together what some people said couldn't be done. A withdrawal agreement for leaving the European Union with all its detail. Now, it's right, we said earlier, the House has rejected that. Now we've got to find a different way. This isn't a normal period of time. This isn't a normal
Why didn't she do this straight after the
legislation.
general election?
Listen, there's a lot of what if, why didn't this happen,
Why
why
didn't
didn't
she?
that
Do
happen?
you regret that?
No, listen, we are where we are.
Oh, absolutely. But do you regret it? Because this is a moment for reflection. The Prime Minister has invited the leaders of the opposition now, at this late stage. We're leaving in a matter of weeks. Do you think now is the time to sort of look back and think, why didn't you do this?
No, we haven't got time for looking back and thinking about what we should have done before. What we need to do now is work with other party leaders, if they'll work with us, not putting conditions on it, I hope, and try and find the majority in the House of Commons.
Will you work with each other?
Well, Jeremy was quite clear tonight, and other opposition leaders said the same, and that's no deal has to be removed off the table. And Theresa May still hasn't done that. I think she needs to reflect upon that over the weekend and come back to Parliament on Monday and say that, because that really would show that she's moving in that direction. And I think it's incredulous for people to say about Jeremy Corbyn and try and push it onto the opposition. But we've not had that opportunity. I've been in post now for 3 years, and I've not been given the opportunity to speak to the Prime Minister or my opposite numbers about what leaving the European Union would be like, because we've been frozen out of those discussions. So the fact that we're in this emergency situation we are is because of Theresa May has not reached out, and she has to do that.
Well, first of all, Ian Blackford did not make it a condition in the way that Jeremy Corbyn made it a condition. He just made it one of the things he wanted to discuss.
Well, he's a number of 3, talked about people and other things, you know.
There weren't conditions. Is Jeremy Corbyn making it a condition of having that talk that this proposal is taken off the table? Because it seems to me a very odd way to respond to a Prime Minister who is trying to have those conversations. You may find them late, but at least we want to have them.
Well, I think you've got to acknowledge even yourself that a no-deal Brexit would be disastrous for the UK, so it has to be ruled out. It's the only reasonable thing for somebody to do, and this is what Jeremy's saying, you know. We want to safeguard jobs in the economy. We said that right from the start. We cannot see palatably a no-deal Brexit, and therefore Theresa May is already wasting billions on trying to prepare for that when she has it within her gift, with the consensus of Parliament, to remove that off the table.
Angela, I'm against a no-deal Brexit as well. I only want it there because we're preparing for the end of March and we have to make sure it's there.
But you know that is not, that doesn't have to happen.
But I wouldn't sit down and have a discussion with you and say we won't have that discussion unless we're ruling it out.
We could all do that. We could all do that because we know it's not a genuine. We know in the House, across the House, as you say, in your own cabinet, that no deal is something that majority of parliamentarians will not accept. So the Prime Minister, with the will of the House, could say that, and I think it's the reasonable thing for her to say. She's reaching out. At the moment, what seems to be saying. She says, I want another crack at talking to you, and I say, at least I've tried to talk to the opposition, and here's my deal again. That's not acceptable.
Well, let's compromise. Let's say it's on the agenda.
Well, me and you are not going to be able to negotiate that on this show tonight.
Andrew and I will show exactly how it's done, which is we will sit down and work it out, no conditions at all.
Right,
we'll just make sure that we discuss everything.
Right, you go ahead, lay it on the table, what the two of you could agree to. I mean, Amber has said that everything will be on the table. Angela, if a customs union was on the table, would that be enough for Jeremy Corbyn and you and the Labour Party to say, yes, we will back that deal?
Well, we've said we want a customs union. We've also talked about environment, workers' protection. You know, we've said there's other things that need to happen.
And those discussions have already happened between Theresa May.
But again, we need to look at the detail. We've not had those discussions. We've not had that opportunity to be part of that. Jeremy says that he's happy to look at that, but you have to take no deal off the table. We've already wasted money, and we've had like traffic jams, mock traffic jams with lorries. We've had freight companies with ship companies with no ships. I mean, this is getting ridiculous now.
Your party also voted for Article 50. So the fact is we're leaving the EU at the end of March unless we put something in place. That's why those preparations have to be made. I think you're right in that we need to make sure we avoid no deal. That's why we have to have these discussions. But can I take the opportunity to ask you, because a lot of Labour MPs want to know the answer to this, and indeed Alistair Carmichael, what is Labour's position on the people's vote? Now they've lost the vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. I thought it was Labour Party's policy to call for it.
Well, we've said we wouldn't take that off the table, but let me come back to that point you made about the fact that we've got this deadline of the end of March. Theresa May has spent over 2 years not talking to parliamentarians, and that's why we're in this position we're in now. I welcome the opportunity to talk, but she has to take no deal off the table. We shouldn't have to prepare for that, and if she'd have worked cross-party from the start, I don't believe we'd be in that position, and I still don't believe we're in a position where no deal is an option for Parliament.
Angela, should it be, though, a precondition for Jeremy Corbyn even walking through the door of number 10 to sit down with Theresa May?
I think it's very reasonable for Jeremy Corbyn to say to Theresa May, who has been dogmatic, to say, you have to start showing to us that you want to work with us. There's been no hint of that, and across the party, across party,
and that would be a very bold offer. That would bring the opposition on board. It would get the agreement to a greater extent of you and David Gauke and Greg Clark and Philip Hammond and others to say, we really haven't done enough preparation for no deal. It is, in your mind, a waste of money if we can get a deal. Let's take it off the table and get agreement with the opposition.
But it shows such bad faith. The Prime Minister has made this proposal. I appreciate you wanted that engagement, and now you're getting it, except you're making a condition which is like you can't even walk in the door. Let's have the compromise. So make it. I will ask the Prime Minister if she'll make it at the top of the agenda, but Jeremy Corbyn has to go into have the discussion.
Hang on, Angela, listen to that. Amber has said that she will talk to the Prime Minister and put the issue of ruling out no deal at the top of the agenda of the talks. Would that be enough for you?
She needs to rule it out on Monday.
There are no compromise.
There is a compromise. The compromise is that we are genuinely willing to negotiate with her. But you've got to remember, she has shown no compromise.
All right, Angela, what would you negotiate on? What would you negotiate on?
Well, we said we want a customs union. We said we want workers' environment and consumer protections. We've been really clear on that. We've been consistent. We've had a consistent shadow Brexit secretary, unlike the Tories who haven't had that. And I think it's disingenuous to put this on Jeremy Corbyn and say somehow that we're not being genuine now. We are. We know that there's a consensus in the House. I know that you would have consensus to rule out a no deal. Let's do that. And then let's not waste billions of pounds on a no deal scenario.
Let's talk about the people's vote and the second referendum. This approach that Labour has taken, you've lost the motion of no confidence in the government this evening, which won't have come as a huge surprise. Will you put forward more motions of no confidence?
Well, we won't be just putting motions of no confidence down for the sake of it, because we need to genuinely start trying to move this forward, which is what we've tried to do from the start.
Because you don't really want to back a people's vote or a second referendum?
It's not the case, no. We've got our confidence motion, which is clear that if we end up in that scenario...
But you're there. The motion of no confidence has been defeated, and then you're looking at people's vote.
There was one motion of no confidence tonight, and it's quite clear that the reason why she got through that tonight was because Turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and the Conservatives are worried about a general election because they know Labour would win, and that Jeremy Corbyn would negotiate a better deal.
When are they going to vote for Christmas, Angela?
Well, you never know, because Theresa May promised us 17 times we weren't going to have a general election, and then we had one.
Because you said you've only had one vote of no confidence. So Labour Party policy to go to a people's vote after a vote of no confidence doesn't mean that. It means after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is the number?
Well, it's interesting that you're interested in the Labour Party all of a sudden, because at the moment you're trying to deflect from where this disastrous Conservative government have taken us. Your party have taken us to this disastrous crisis. In this crisis.
What is the position? Because it's very difficult to understand, because
it's not difficult to understand. If you read our confidence motion, it's very clear. It says nothing will be taken off the table. It doesn't say we'll have one confidence motion, then immediately go to a people's vote. That's not where we were. You want us to negotiate with you, but now you're saying you want me to go for a people's vote, you know, because you want the deflection away from the mess that the Conservatives have made of this so far, and you want to try and muddy the water on where Labour are. We're very clear on where we are.
Do you think, what are the chances of getting consensus in the House? Listening to the two, listening to the two, you'll have to work a bit harder. Is that all it's going to take?
I think we will be able to find consensus, but it will require everybody talking to each other, and it will require a bit of time. So I hope we're going to be able to do both of those.
Is there time? Is there really time? Or do you also now have to be honest and decide you've got to extend Article 50 to give yourself more time?
Well, as I say, I don't think anything is off the table, but those conversations have to take place.
2 years.
Which is what
2 years.
Well, you keep on looking at the back. We are now here where we are.
We are, and many of us politicians are very angry about that, because we've been frozen out that process, and it's been disastrous for our country.
Think the right answer
and to try and deflect it onto Jeremy is not acceptable.
Well, the answer is not to do more freezing yourself.
Rule out a no-deal Brexit, which me and you both agree is disastrous. We don't want the billions we're spending on that now, when it could go into our NHS and our schools. It's terrible. It doesn't have to happen. Rule it out. Let's have discussion.
You've made that point. I don't think that freezing out the Prime Minister when she's made a proposal to have those conversations is very conducive. Well, you have. You've said you were to have the meeting.
And on the basis that Jeremy Corbyn does not take up the invitation of the Prime Minister, what's her next move?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
What would you do?
She has... Well, she's made an offer to have conversations with other party leaders. Maybe we'll make some progress there. Maybe they will put other proposals that might help to move the dial. I don't know.
Right, and in terms of finding out what MPs think, should a series of votes now happen to test the temperature in the House?
Well, I don't think that should be ruled out. I think that the House must be forced to think about what it does want. I mean, Andrew and I can both tell you what things we don't want to take place, and there's been a lot of that from MPs. What we need to find out is what MPs will support, and a series of votes might be the way forward.
Do you agree?
Well, I mean, like I say, we're in a very short period of time now. A series of votes made of that. We've got the amendments that can happen next week. Theresa May's coming to Parliament on Monday. Let's see what happens there. But I think genuinely Theresa May needs to really start pushing a little bit harder to show parliamentarians that she means business, that she genuinely wants to work with us. At the moment, I'm not seeing any of that. And I don't think that's just me as a parliamentarian that sees that. I think you've seen that from the contributions that were made today from other members of Parliament.
I think we're seeing
back and front bench.
I think we're seeing things changing, and I think that'll make a big difference.
Well, on that, and the two of you talking together, that's all we have time for from Politics Live this evening. After that vote of no confidence, I'll be back tomorrow.